Chicken and dumplings is something that absolutely defines the word comfort. It scratches the same itch that chicken noodle soup does, but it's richer, it's more interesting, and in my opinion, it's something that my soul craves. It just kind of feels like home. My version, I try to keep the work to a minimum, and I try to get as much chicken flavor as possible that I can. I'll show you how I make it. Like I said, I like my chicken and dumplings extra chickeny, so I make the soup base by bringing 2 quarts of chicken stock to a simmer. Instead of cooking our chicken in water to make the broth, we'll cook the chicken in stock to make an extra fortified, flavorful soup. The fat in the skin from the chicken is gonna render and give us tons of tasty, delicious chicken fatty mouthfeel. And instead of using a carton stock, I really prefer better than bouillon in situations like this. It's what my parents always used, and I think the end result is much richer. For 2 quarts of water, I'll add in about 1 tablespoon and a half of better than bouillon and bring that base to a simmer. Add in a couple of bay leaves, let that come up to a simmer, and then place your chicken into the stock and cover the pot. You need a large enough pot here to make sure that the chicken is almost completely submerged, if not completely submerged. This will need at least an hour for the chicken to be cooked and tender. We want the dark meat to be nice and fall apart without overcooking the white meat. This whole hour can be pretty much unattended, so say goodbye until it's time to check on the chicken. Now, I'm from Texas, where chicken and dumplings, sure, you can get it, but it's not as much of a staple. It's kind of like a, it sounds so bad, it's kind of like an old person cafeteria meal. Like if you're going to Luby's, you're probably getting chicken and dumplings. If you know what Luby's is, you kind of get that. But my wife is from Mississippi, and that is a place where chicken and dumplings just flow like the river. It's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but it really is a restaurant staple, and more importantly, it's something that you can get at home. It's a dish that sort of feels like your favorite chair that you just want to like sink into. The simplicity of its flavor makes it something that is just like perfect for maybe when you're feeling under the weather. And so this reminds me of Megan Kay and I's early dating when I went to Mississippi for the first time, and just all of those warm Southern hospitality type memories wrapped into one. So it's pretty special. Depending on your pot shape, the chicken may be done, or it may need around 10 more minutes or so. But once it's cooked, we can remove it from the pot and set it aside to cool down. We're gonna need this at a temperature that's cool enough to handle with our hands, and that can take a little bit of time. This is the time that I like to skim out the bay leaves and any scum that's come out of the chicken. It's pretty easy to do if you've got a sieve of almost any size. You're just gonna create a vortex and run your skim through the spinning middle. The vortex kind of pulls any objects into the middle of the pot, and it makes it really easy to pull them out. While it cools, we can work on our biscuit dough, and this is where people get really split on chicken and dumplings. Should the dumplings be thicker, fluffier, almost more like a biscuit cooked in the broth, or should it be more thin, toothsome, like a noodle? I definitely fall in the more noodle camp. I want it to fit on the spoon nicely with the chicken and the broth. I don't want to have to like cut through it. It's not matzo ball soup, it's chicken and dumplings. Start by measuring out 2 cups of self-rising flour and combine that with 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon of dried herbs. Poultry seasoning would pretty much be perfect for this if you've got it lying around. You just want those warm chicken spices, think sage, thyme, rosemary, something like that is gonna be delicious. Add in 2 tablespoons of lard and mix that together with your hands until it's been flaked in. To do that, I like to just squeeze the fat between my thumb and pointer finger until it's broken down. It's gonna create a bunch of like thin, flat layers in the dough. Add in half a cup of buttermilk and mix it until a rough dough has formed. Depending on your flour, the humidity, and a bunch of other factors, you may need to add a splash more buttermilk. You don't want this to be like crumbly, fall apart like a regular biscuit. You do need this to hold together. Place the rough dough on a floured surface and knead until it's kind of fully held together. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you do want this holding its shape so we can roll it out. Split the dough in half and then roll out 1/2 to about 1/8 of an inch thick. A nice tip to help with the rolling is turning the dough 45 degrees as you go. That's gonna keep it from sticking to the board, and it's also gonna make the shape much more even. Slice the dough into pieces that are roughly about 1 inch by 1/2 inch. That gives us a really nice rectangle to fit on our spoon. Toss them in a little bit of flour after they've been cut so they don't stick together while we work on the other half. Grab your other half and do the same until you've got a massive pile of delicious little dumplings just waiting to be plunged into our bath of chickeny broth. This recipe makes a ratio that's about equal parts chicken and dumpling. I like a little bit more chicken in my chicken and dumplings than other people do, but if you want more dumplings, you can easily increase the recipe by 50%. I'll put those new amounts in the description for you, but it's a pretty simple ratio increase. At the stove, bring your broth up to a rapid boil and drop in your dumplings, but you want to be careful here to make sure that they don't stick. As you drop in the cold dumplings, the temperature of the broth is going to drop heavily, so keep an eye on it. We want to get this back up to a boil pretty quickly. Once it's up to boiling, back the heat down to a bare simmer, and we're going to cook the dumplings for about 10 minutes. While they cook, we can pull our chicken that's been cooling by hand. At this point, it's pretty easy to pull the legs and thighs off and separate the meat from the bone and the cartilage. I don't like to put the skin back in the pot, so I remove that as well. One pile is going to be all of our good usable meat, and then the other pile is going to be the unusable parts that you can kind of snack on and pick at later. I'm going to use scissors to chop any of the really large pieces into a more manageable bite size. The chicken isn't going to fall apart much more than this because we're not going to do a ton of stirring. Once this goes back into the pot, if we stir too much, we're going to break apart those beautiful dumplings, and we don't want that. After the 10 minutes has passed, add in your chicken and season this with a ton of black pepper. Like, I really like black pepper as the main spice counterpart to the smooth, rich chicken flavor. Let this come back to a simmer for another 10 minutes so the chicken's warmed through and the gravy can start to thicken. Some of the flour from the outside of the dumplings sort of falls into the broth to thicken it to this creamy and beautiful consistency that chicken dumplings is known for. I don't like to add cream to mine because I think it sort of waters down the chicken flavor itself. We're gonna taste this for seasoning one last time. I haven't added any salt here, so you're gonna need to adjust the salt pretty heavily. Be aware though, because better than bouillon can be a little bit salty. This needs to rest for like 10 to 15 minutes, so just turn the heat off and let it go. This rest time is important because as a liquid that's been thickened by a starch cools, it actually gets thicker and you get the final texture a little bit more close to what you want it. So this is gonna be the point where you judge if you need to add a little bit more broth to thin it out or if it's right where you want it to be. After that resting time, this is ready to serve up. I really like two things on my chicken and dumpling. I like black pepper and I like a little bit of good tasting olive oil just to bring in a little bit of that vegetable flavor that we're missing because we didn't add veggies to our broth. As I was toying with this recipe, I found it really important to leave it as is, to leave the chicken as the main star. This is beautiful, simple comfort food at its finest, and why mess with that? The chicken flavor like punches you in the face. It's like sweet in a way that you're not expecting because chicken can really have this beautiful like umami sweetness that just gets shown in all of its glory here. If you've ever wanted to know what it's like staying with a family in the South, this is gonna get you as close as possible. It's a beautiful thing and it's something that I absolutely think you should make. Thank you so much for watching. I had a ton of fun coming up with and testing and getting this recipe really right, so I hope you enjoyed it. I wanna give a massive shout out to the amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. There's a group of people there who've decided that my work is worthy of supporting financially and they get some cool benefits for doing so. So if you're interested, again, check that out. Their names are going by on screen, so thank you so much. If for any reason in the future you need to make a dish to bring to a potluck, might I recommend last week's episode on cornbread. I'll teach you how to make the absolute best cornbread you can ever have. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.